Welcome to Delay the Decay, the podcast for the unashamedly ambitious who want to live longer, lead better, and love deeper by prioritizing what matters most. I'm your host, Dan Harty, coach, entrepreneur, and former pastor, here to help you build a life of intentional direction, not perfection, across 5 life domains: spiritual, relational, physical, mental, and financial. In our current mini-series, The Chain Reaction, How One Generation Shapes the Next, we'll explore what it means to pursue generational health across 5 life domains. Because direction, not perfection, is what echoes across generations and becomes the story our children tell. Welcome to another episode of Delay the Decay with Dan Harty. Today, my special guest is the one and only, my beloved wife, Nancy Harty. Nancy, welcome, honey. Thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome. I'd say thanks for having me, but you know how much I love being recorded, so.
Yes, right. You're probably thinking thanks for nothing. But I couldn't imagine doing this generational health series without you. We're talking about chain reactions, how one generation impacts the other. And you have been my partner in life, and my friend and my closest everything for the last 45 years. So I know you don't relish the idea of talking in front of a mic or being in front of a camera, but your story is important. And so we're going to poke into that today. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about, not me, because I feel like I know about everything, but tell the audience, tell us one habit or discipline that you've established lately that is keeping you growing in the right direction, the healthy direction.
Well, I'd say one thing that has been, I feel like, been consistent and helpful. Then I started it in January when I did the 40-day fight. And it's something that you and I have both done over the years, here and there, but it's been a consistent every morning thing for me. And that is to, first thing when I wake up, before I get out, when I get out of bed, I just drop to my knees and just pray, just a simple prayer to begin my day.
Yeah. How does that impact your day?
It kind of just helps me set my day. I was encouraged from Psalm, I think 143. It says something like, I lift my voice to you this morning, Lord. Let me hear of your loving kindness. For in you I put my trust. Make me know the way I should go. For to you I lift up my soul. So I just basically set my heart and my mind in that way. And then I might pray something that might have woke me up in the night, or something that's on my heart, or sometimes it's just a simple, help me to know where to go today.
Yeah. Well, thank you I know you don't do it for me, but just when I see you draw near to the Lord and wanting to start your day in submission to the Lord with your eyes fixed on him, it compels me to do the same. To see your deep and imperfect faith spurs me on to want to know Jesus more. So thank you for that. I know that faith in Jesus, trusting in Jesus, hasn't been your entire life story. Tell us a little bit about just your upbringing and however you want to describe that. As we're talking about generational health, we've talked about on air, and you and I have talked about this off air, how we're all products of nature and nurture. We're products of the way God's knit us together fearfully and wonderfully. And we're also products of loving families, in our case, loving families who raised us imperfectly. Tell us a little bit about your journey, wherever you want to start.
Well, I guess coming, you and I converging, I feel like some of the things that I brought together, one was a family that was, growing up, we always went to church, and later on I feel like my parents did a good job of teaching us about Jesus. And so I feel like I brought that into our marriage, of having a heart and desire to really want to know the Lord. And I'd seen him at work in my families' lives. And so I feel like I kind of brought that in historically. And then I think too, from growing up, we came from kind of a farming community in Nebraska, moved to Colorado. My dad was always a really hard worker and had all these girls to raise, and so it seemed like he was always working a job, and then he'd bale hay for to make extra money, and he was always having to work more than one job. And so I feel like I just learned a lot through hard work from him, and then also from my mom. Just she was sick a lot, so she wasn't able to really. I wouldn't say she modeled hard work, but there was a time when my little sister wanted to take dance, and so my mom would make kraut burgers to help pay for the lessons. And so I saw that too, just to figure out how to make things work. And then in my family, my parents didn't have the best marriage, but they were committed, and I saw them live out their marriage vows. And I knew that I didn't want our marriage to look like their marriage, but I knew that I wanted to be committed. And that was just, so I feel like I brought that in as well. And then probably one other thing that I would say is that I came from a hospitable home. My mom, the door was always open. In fact, after she passed away, that was probably the thing that hit me the most, was going to the house and going to open the door. She wasn't there and the door was locked. And that was just, she always had an open door policy, no matter how things looked, whatever. It was just like, come over and come in. So
I love that. Yeah. What do you feel like some of the key lessons you learned? You mentioned some of them, some of the key lessons you learned by what you were taught growing up, or maybe just what you observed, like the hospitality and the hard work and that type of thing. What are some of the values that you pulled out that, not even knowing it, that you carried forward into your marriage and into your parenting?
I think one was being available. I wanted, brought that into our marriage. I think the hard work, I guess loyalty along with that, just every job that I had, it was just, I felt like, like I was there for the long haul. They needed me, or, even though they didn't need me, but I just had that, kind of feeling that I needed to do my best. And I guess some of those things were really just caught because they weren't taught. I don't really remember a lot of my parents' like individual instruction. I think especially with my mom having poor health a lot. I think my sisters and I were, kind of just, we played and just were on our own a lot. And although I would say my mom, she dressed us well and fed us, she made clothes for us. And so that was something, she was creative.
Did you feel loved and accepted for who you were?
Yes, definitely. I always felt loved. I think that here I'm coming off of listening to our kids talk, and they're like, "Mom's always working," and I think sometimes that I'm like, "Gosh, that it is true." And I think some of it came from when I was little and having my mom like be in the hospital, or just work was just fun for me, and I just worked and I got a lot of accolations for it. And I also I remember some of my mom's friends would say, oh, you can bring her to my house anytime. And I just really learned that it was something that I could help and get noticed for. And yeah, it became part of my identity, for good or bad. It's just, I don't know how to not be that way. I also feel like it has also been kind of a safety net for me, that, when different times when my mom would be in the hospital, my sisters, we all had our roles that we played. And one of my things would be like, I'd change the sheets and wash the sheets and, just start jumping into work. And so It's part of who I am.
You mentioned that you got affirmation when you worked, when you
Hmm.
served. From my perspective, I mean, you don't serve and you don't work to be seen, to receive the accolades of people. Maybe you fight that in your flesh, but I just see you serving because you really love people. And I remember over the years, actually, that there's been a couple of instances with other ladies where there was actually a jealousy of sorts because you serve so much. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that, so I think I felt like I needed to back off for a while. And every time I back off, then I think, if God, I feel like God's given us all a purpose in life. And like one of the things I feel like I can't not serve. I feel like that's something he made me to do. And so I feel like I'm not honoring him if I'm not doing that. And sometimes I think, in the, like you said, in the flesh, and like when I want to be noticed or something, I think that's where I have to, always a good heart check, is if I ever feel like, well, they didn't even appreciate that or whatever, then I'm like, okay, I was doing that for myself. And so, but I think sometimes I just see somebody that needs help and I can't not. And I may offend them, but then I don't know, just have to do what I do.
Yeah, you're super sensitive to the spirit in that. I really appreciate that. A couple of assessments that have helped us in our marriage over the years is one is the Enneagram, but one earlier on was the five love languages. And it's so easy, at least for me, to try to like shape my spouse or other people into my image, which would be bad for everybody, bad for the world, it'd be bad for the other person. But when we did the five love languages, and I understood that your love language is service, serving. That's your primary one, and mine is what?
Um, Quality time.
Yes, and those two can cause conflict because my happy place is sitting on the couch with my arm around you, looking at a sink full of dirty dishes. And your happy place is get off the couch and let's make sure the kitchen is cleaned up. And what I've learned through by God's grace, I'm a slow learner over 45 years, is that for you to feel loved is for me to do some things around the house. And I'm not very handy, and I'm kind of lazy. And so I've had to really work on that to show maximum love for you. Is that's
That's
been
so
a
true.
challenge a little bit, hasn't it?
Yeah, well,
That's
and
what?
I said that's so true. And I think that you're always like, well, let's just go for a walk, and I just want to talk. And I'm like, well, can we like just trim the bushes and talk together?
And I'm going, oh my goodness, like Jesus, take me home. Yeah, or
Or then I remember, like for Mother's Day, you would say, okay, you just sit, like just sit in your room. We'll bring you coffee. Like you just stay here and we're going to serve you. And then I'm like, well, I don't want to be in here by myself. And I want to be where all you guys are. And like, and then you ask me, where's this? Where's that? How do you do this? How do you do that? I'm like, just let me jump in and do it with you guys.
yes, yeah. I think both of those two things, like if there's couples, whether you've been married just a short period of time or a long period of time, like just the simple understanding of your spouse's love language is so helpful. And then I would throw the Enneagram in there as well. We've had a lot of fun with that. That you're a number two helper. That just describes you to a T. And I'm a number eight challenger or protector. And that describes me to a T. And those things should never be used as weapons, but if they can be used to help understand other people and how to love them better, man, that's just a good thing, isn't it?
For sure, we've learned a lot, even in the last few years in those ways. It's been fun to grow in that.
What about challenges? From my paradigm, hard things, challenges, trials, refines us, makes us actually look more like Jesus. Not that we would choose hardship, but going back to your upbringing again, what type of hardships, trials did you experience that the Lord has redeemed? He's used to mold you and make you into the wonderful woman that you are today.
Probably, as a child, when my mom had twin babies between myself and then my youngest sister, and they they were both premature. The little they and born at home. The little girl died was stillborn, and then the boy was he lived and then was taken to the hospital. He was in the hospital for 3 months, and then after he was home for a while, he died at home. And um, and I think that was hard. It was hard because my mom, she was depressed after that, and I just can't even imagine that what my parents went through with that. And and then some financial things of the meat plant my dad worked at went out of business, and we moved to Colorado, and then we left family behind. And so there was things with that was difficult. We were really close to my grandma, and she was wheelchair bound, and um,
Mhm.
so I just can't imagine how hard that was for my parents, but just seeing them, just figure out how to live and keep moving on, and then for them to grow in their faith and have develop community around them. My mom had some really good friends, and I always I liked that, seeing that.
Yeah. Do you feel like you can put words around how that's those hardships, having a baby sister or brother die, to seeing your mom sick, your dad losing his job, leaving family behind in Nebraska? How did the Lord use those in your life for good to shape you into the helper and compassionate woman that you are?
Well, I think it's made me just more aware of life experiences and what people go through, and also to um, know that people all grieve differently, and yeah, and just to not judge people for that, and just to see. I remember, well, I mean, there's so much more, but when the babies died, I remember all these people came to our house. And even as a child, I thought, why is my mom having to do all this work? So I think that, just indirectly, those things kind of affect you even as a child, and they're not talked about, but you just kind of learn along the way. Probably brought in a lot of fears that I've had to deal with over my life, of just a lot of fears um, with people, something
Hmm.
happening and all that. So,
Do you have a mechanism that when those fears and anxieties creep in even today, that what do you what do you do with those?
well, I have I pray. I always say they fuel my prayer life, and that is probably the biggest thing. And then I just have my whole list of scriptures that I can run through my mind and heart, and so I think that's true. And also just to talk about it. And I talk to you about them a lot, just because I feel like giving, just bringing it out in the light, and instead of just like holding it to myself, then you can um, maybe not reassure me, because maybe it is things that are really true, but you can come alongside me, so I'm not alone.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's something I continually want to grow in. Even yesterday I asked you about something hard that was going on, and I asked you how you felt about it. And do you remember how you responded?
I think I said I was terrified.
You're terrified,
Yeah.
and I just appreciate that about you, and I appreciate that about our relationship. As imperfect as our relationship has been and continues to be, is that you're always vulnerable, and I'm not always the most compassionate, but I think I'm growing there. but I just appreciate you being honest when you're struggling, when you're fearful, anxious, terrified. So grateful for that.
I think it's a interesting thing as a Christian, and as long as we walk with the Lord, I feel like it's something that we're always. I remember a lady asking for prayer. She said, "I'm trying to trust," and I was like, I love those words, because I think that we can say, well, just trust the Lord for that, trust, but really we're just battling for trust, and not letting our minds go to all the wrong places.
Yeah. It brings my mind to the guy in Scripture where Jesus asked him if he believed. And he said, I believe, help my unbelief. Because certainly we believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ, but it's those daily things to be reminded that he's in control and he's good and he hears our prayers. And I believe, but help my unbelief. And so appreciate that. We've been married 45 years. And we both brought in good things into the marriage, and we both brought in baggage into the marriage. And we were married young. I was 22, you were 20. I graduated on Friday afternoon, and we got married less than 24 hours later on Saturday. No job, didn't have a place to live secured. All I knew was what we were doing the next 2.5 weeks, and that was a honeymoon. And yeah, how would you describe our early years of marriage? Maybe the first 13 years from when we said I do until we moved to Fort Collins in the 13th year.
Gosh, how would I describe it? I feel like there was a lot. I feel like we fought a lot. We both were pretty selfish. Just we both started our jobs, entered into our careers, and just worked and worked, and it worked for us. We had we'd go on vacation. That would be good. That would always be helpful. I feel like you were jealous a lot in those days, which I felt was uncalled for. So that caused a lot of problems. And honestly, I don't even remember like what we fought about, but we fought all the time, it seemed like.
Yeah, and we really didn't have the tools to know
No,
how to work through conflict,
no,
right?
no.
Yeah, we had no premarital counseling. Our parents, I mean, we observed things from our parents, but we didn't we weren't trained on how to navigate, conflict.
Exactly.
And we lived very separate lives, right? Natalie didn't come along until, was she born in '86?
Hmm.
So she came around, and I look back on that, and I'm wonder, God is always doing more than one thing at a time, and I wonder if having kids wasn't one of the graces that God showered on us to save our marriage, because we both loved that little girl
Hmm.
and doted on her together, and then 2 years later, Mitch came along, and then 4 years later, Joey came along, and we're still kind of living separate lives, other than it was our kids that we had in common.
For sure. Well, I think during that time, I remember, like for me, just really, even having grown up in the church, grew up thinking I knew the Lord, I was always trying to find Him, or trying to get to Him. And so I think during that time, it was just my degree was in early childhood. I loved children. I always wanted to be a mom. Like I was, wanted to be a mom and a wife, and it's seeming like my life should be perfect, but always feeling like there's got to be more than this. And so I think during that was also a very time of, you know, seeking the Lord for both of us, really.
Yeah. Do you think even a different way of saying it, maybe more accurate, is that it seemed like the Lord was seeking us, was the hound of heaven was coming after us?
Yeah, that's really true because it everything just started colliding. Just
Hmm.
seemed like things were happening fast.
Yeah, and so much was going on. And you stopped working full time when Mitch came on the scene.
Hmm.
So you worked pretty much full time for the first 8 years of our marriage.
Right. I took a break with Natalie a little bit, but then went back to work or and then
Okay.
decided I can't do this.
Yeah, I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that you stayed home and raised our kids. That's not a prescription for every woman, but it was best for you and our family for
Mhm.
sure. During that time, we had no tools on how to make a marriage work. We both came from families where we saw our parents persevere in marriage, right? They
Mhm.
they stayed together through hardship, through good and bad, and so we had that going for us. We both knew that there was a God, a creator who uh, wanted a relationship with us in some way, but we didn't really know how to grab a hold of that. The first 6, 8 years of our marriage, church was not even, it wasn't even a thought. I think we maybe went to the Catholic Church a few times, and then the Lord started inviting me and us to different things. David Jones invited me to Dad the Family Shepherd. Somebody invited me to Promise Keepers. Stan Harwood, a client of mine, a dear older man who I can't wait to see in heaven someday, invited us to go to Foothills Bible Church. So we went there a few times, even though it was kind of weird and awkward, especially when they would have visitors stand up and hand you a flower. It's like everybody's looking at you like, these people have never been to church. Everybody like, and then our friends, my friends from high school and college, the CGC group invited us to a Bible study like that. That that was all compressed into probably a 12-month period of time.
Yeah.
What do you recall then? Was Fort Collins on the scene at that time? Were we talking about moving initially?
Not initially. It just seemed like all these things were happening. And also there was a lady from Mitchell's little preschool that invited me to a Bible study. So that was going on. And I had just seen enough of my growing up about just like the way God works to know that something was going on. So there was a bit of excitement. And then you had came home one day and said, what would you think about, obviously was something that you had given some thought to about the possibility of moving up to Fort Collins. And having lived up north, I loved northern Colorado. I wasn't, so that was exciting. And then Teresa, your sister, and I were just best friends. Our kids were stair stepped in ages. So I thought, well, that would just be perfect to be close to them. And so all that excitement. And then it just seemed like things just snowballed that we were just almost like whisked out. Our house went up for sale and it sold. And we moved and found a great rental. And then just could really see God's hand in all of that.
Did we talk about? Was I honest back then about why I thought we should move to Fort Collins from Denver?
Yeah, and I think it was a little bit of a progression because I think that think you were feeling conviction about like we're just trying to live this fast lane life. We're hanging out with the fancy people and trying to um, just get to the top. And I think that you just felt like our priorities were getting out of whack. And so I think that like you were honest about that. And some of the things that we changed, like you said, well, I think we need to start giving more money to like more of our money to like just Christian causes. And so that was one of the steps that was going along the way. That felt good. Um, and and then it was just like, I think we just need to just move.
Hmm. Yeah. And then a big part of it for me was there were so many temptations. There were so many bad habits, bad attitudes that I was involved in that I needed to move our family. I think of the passage. I think it's in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 where Paul says that there is no temptation that is not common to man, but God always gives a way of escape. And that way of escape sometimes is loading up the truck and moving to Beverly. And so we had to leave our old life behind, the old life that God's grace was evident because we stuck together. He blessed us with three amazing kids. We stayed long enough for the hound of heaven to really see that he was knocking and to really live a life of obedience and submission to him. I felt like we really needed a change of location and literally starting a new life. And we started a new life in total in northern Colorado.
Sure felt like it.
We determined that we need to start going to church. And I say that purposely. It's not that I wanted to go to church. I felt like we needed to go to church. So God works through needs sometimes, not always wants.
Mm-hmm.
And describe that experience on move to Fort Collins, what that felt like to you, finding a new church, and how did you feel about it?
Well, I was really happy to be going to church for sure. The process taking three little kids to find a church isn't always the easiest. And but then and we both grew up in traditional churches, so trying to figure out like what's going to work. And then we ended up at Mountain View Community Church, and it was funny because just the whole environment of it was. They were meeting in a junior high school. It was brand new, and our kids loved it. They said, "Can we go back to that school church?" And I remember sitting there one Sunday and just thinking that the pastor had a chip on his shoulder. There was just everything he was saying was just rubbing me wrong. And then, not long afterwards, I realized it wasn't him, it was me. He was just preaching God's word, and I was just uncomfortable with it because I wasn't there. So that was it was a great time. I remember there was a lady that I noticed that was singing, and she seemed like she was so full of joy, and I was really drawn to that. I was drawn to her, and she became a good friend. But I thought I wanted what she had.
Hmm. Talk about God's providence. You grew up in Methodist church. I grew up in the Catholic church. We're both used to, more high church, stained glass windows and pews, and the preacher, the pastor, the priest has robes on, and we show up in that place, and like it's the opposite of all of that. It was laid back. They served donuts and coffee, which I think that's one of the reasons our kids wanted to go back. Was it donut holes? I think.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep, no doubt.
yeah. And God's providence. We end up there. 13th year of marriage. We've been married 45, and we are still connected to the pastor and his wife of that church. Not only are we connected, I think we would say that they are amongst our best friends to this day.
Absolutely.
And then as we fast forward, take me through the next season of life. We're in Fort Collins. Kids are now growing. What did you love about being a mom? What was hard about being a mom? What did you love about that season? What was hard about that season?
I loved everything about being a mom. I did not love disciplining. That was not my jam. I did it, but oh, I always wanted to like look the other way, but it didn't work. I feel like the kids would just push me until I did act on it. But yeah, just because I felt like they needed a regroup. But there's just nothing that I can say that I didn't love about being a mom. I noticed like as the kids started getting older and not needing you as much, or they needed what do I want to say, especially with the boys, they didn't need as much like coddling and cuddling. They still were affectionate for sure, and still needed their back scratched and stuff like that. But they didn't want me mommying them. And I'm trying to think how to put that. And that's as they're getting like into their preteens, and they just needed to spread their wings a little bit and be. And I remember going to you and saying, I'm struggling. I don't know how to be a mom right now. And you said, well, boys just need respect, just like men, just it's the same. So then just trying to see them not just as my little boys, but really as men, and that's what they were growing into. So I just needed to lean into their strengths, and then having a daughter was easy for me. I had three sisters, and so I kind of knew what to do with girls. So
Talk a little bit about that consistency part. Disciplining the kids wasn't your favorite thing, but we were resolved the best we could to be consistent. Let our yeses be yes, our no be no, and not threaten discipline and never follow through on it. Talk about consistency and how important that is in how hard it is, but how important it is in parenting.
well, it's so important because kids they're gonna push the line if you're not consistent. They're gonna say, well, it didn't work the last time, so maybe I can get away with it this time. And so I see it as that it is so important, but I also acknowledge how hard it is, and for people, because it was hard for me. And sometimes I felt like I was constantly having to, well, just say we spanked our kids. I felt like I was spanking them all the time. And then growing up, mostly really the boys. But then they would say, Mom, your spankings never hurt. And they just tease me about it now. And I'm like, you are kidding.
Mm,
But
yeah.
it was important. And I feel like it was fun being a mom. I think the aspect of, I feel like our family kind of operated like a team, even though I didn't play any team sports. I think our family kind of operated that way, that we all just kind of jumped in and got things done, and you know that's how it worked. That it wasn't just going to be you and I doing everything. Everybody had to pitch in and help to make the whole thing come together.
hmm Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about that team aspect because I think that's really insightful. Staying on the consistency theme just for a moment. I don't want anybody to mishear us and say like you need to be consistent to the points where there's never to the point where there's never grace. You can be consistent and also extend grace. And usually that grace comes. You want to discipline when there's patterns of sin, patterns of disobedience. But when there's disobedience that is just kind of like a one-off, like that doesn't, it's nothing. We're not particularly concerned about that. We would extend grace. And I was thinking of one instance where sometimes you would leave the spankings to me, not always, but I remember one time you left Joey to me for when I came home, and I don't remember what it was. I don't remember how old he was. I know he was older than 1 and younger than 18, but I had him take down his pants, and I was gonna just give him a swat on his bare bottom. So he took down his pants, and there's Batman underwear. I said, Joey, take the underwear off. He took the Batman underwear off, and there was Spider-Man underwear under that. And then I had him take that down, and there was another pair of underwear. He had put on like layers because he was preparing for the spanking. And you know what I did?
I do know.
I didn't spank him. I didn't spank him. And there was other times, and I know this is true for you too, that when we had to spank our kids, we didn't take pleasure in it. And I remember a couple times weeping while I was spanking the kids.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Uh, I remember bringing me to tears a lot. I mean, I remember one time it wasn't I hadn't disciplined, but the thing that always set me over the edge is if mainly if the boys weren't getting along. And, then I felt like I'm not the ref here. You guys are both at fault. So a lot of times I just have them, like both discipline them both, or they both have to do a job for the other one or something. But there was a time they were playing and I just yelled and I was so mad. And people always think I'm so sweet, but I was so frustrated. And then I said, I have just got to go be by myself, be with the Lord for a little bit by myself. And then Mitch, just as a sweet, like out of the mouth of babes, said, well, I don't see how you can hear him when you're yelling like that. And I just went in the closet and then I just sat down on the floor and I just cried because I was like, I'm a failure.
Yeah. Each of our kids, in the podcast conversations I had with them, they brought up the topic of hard work. Our family theme was hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And they talked about mom being a hard worker. Even to this day, Joey joked about you coming out to Kansas City and like you work when you're there. And he said that as a good thing, as a compliment, that they appreciate that a ton. But teamwork, you made work fun. The kids mentioned that as adults. They look back and they said, you made work fun. How did you do that? And how did you even come up with that?
Well, I don't, probably because work for me is fun. So maybe, but I think that, and maybe some of it came from having, worked in early childhood, is that, little kids, you kind of give them a little bit along the way and you can't expect, and also just every child has their own strengths. Some kids you see at 2 years old, they're lining everybody's shoes up by the door, but not everybody's doing that. So I think that every kid, um, in training, sometimes they just need you to help them, come alongside them and say, we'll do this. And when giving them little bits along the way, like, um, put your, you put your socks and underwear away, and then you can fill up your laundry basket, grows as they get older. And, um, but I think that, and then as they got older, sometimes they just appreciated the help. And I saw like they're trying to keep up with school and sports and you know, Natalie babysitting, or the boys, taking jobs, and like they could use some help along the way. And I'd say, do you want me to team up with them, or just,
Hmm.
I think just, I noticed that they liked certain things. Natalie liked learning how to be, and I think just because she liked being a girl and wanted to be a mom. And but the boys, I noticed that they liked outdoor chores better than they liked the indoor chores. And so sometimes I just give them stuff to do outside. Or, I remember telling them a broom you're going to have to use a broom wherever you work in your life. You're going to need to know how to use a broom. So here we go. Or it'd be like, well, if we do this, then we can go do that. So let's all everybody take a job off the list.
What everything was outside for the boys except for one thing. Why did they like emptying the dishwasher with you?
Well, I think Mitch said that was because I was like, okay, let's see how fast we can get this done.
Yes,
But we probably have a lot of chipped dishes from it, but it's okay. Nothing's that fancy.
probably so, but it is fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you had a cleanup song when the kids were littler
Well,
that it was like the Pied Piper. Where did you get that from?
I don't know. Probably, I mean, I think I had a song for everything. Or you really can come up with, there is a song for everything, truly.
Well, I think it was Natalie that mentioned that we were a family of reconcilers,
Mm.
that we owned our stuff. Would you talk about that a little bit? Just um, even after we moved to Fort Collins, the Lord got a hold of us. We were in a church. Life is so much better than it was in Denver as far as us connecting. We still had to learn how to fight in a way that honored the Lord, and then how to make up or reconcile. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, you know, so we're 70s, in our grew up in the 70s when they said love is never having to say you're sorry. And then you get married and you learn that's a joke that does not work. So that I think along the way that we just, well, the scriptures say to forgive is as Lord has forgiven you. And we think, if all you have to do is think about that for very long and know that what you've been forgiven from, or, that undeserving forgiveness that God, that gave through Jesus, is how can we not forgive each other, and to humble ourselves, which is really difficult to do. And actually, I think that a lot of times you're better than I am at, at humbling yourself to ask forgiveness. Sometimes it takes me longer. I'm pretty stubborn, but I am thankful that we ask forgiveness and not just say, we say, will you forgive me? And I think that is something, if we could say we did anything well, be probably because we messed up so much that we could say, will you forgive me, and grant forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
That we did teach that in our home and to our kids too,
Mm-hmm.
because we messed up with them and could ask their forgiveness for it, and still do to this day.
Yes. Why is I'm sorry not enough? Why is it important from your perspective to say, I'm sorry, would you forgive me?
Well, it's one-sided. You're not,
Mm.
not letting the other person enter in and to understand how it made them feel, or you're just like, you could just be like, well, I blew it. I wished I hadn't done that, so I'm sorry. But if you're saying, will you forgive me? And, and also, take it another step is, how did that make you feel? And then it can, you know, even go
Mm-hmm.
deeper in what you have to ask forgiveness for. Because sometimes
Yeah,
a lot of times we don't mean to hurt somebody, but we do it.
exactly. There's a phrase that I have become fond of the last couple of years, and that phrase is that in every transition, there's loss. Think of some of the transitions that we have experienced that may have even been good transitions, but there was a sense of loss. And why might it be important to recognize that?
I think it can help you in making some things that are your choice to make, in making decisions, that
Hmm.
acknowledging that, both sides, there's going to be a loss, but there's also going to be a gain. Like even when we moved from Fort Collins, we were moving up towards, more other family, but we were leaving a lot of your family in Denver, which we didn't get as much time with them. So that was a loss, I think, and just work transitions.
Talk about the work transitions. What kind of loss did you feel in my work transitions?
Oh gosh, I think, early when we were early married and you were selling office equipment, and then you started doing really
Hmm.
well at it, and then you wanted to change jobs, and I was like, why do you want to change jobs? Like it seems like things are this is going good. So then we moved to Denver, and so it felt like a little bit of a loss. We'd lived in Fort Collins and moved to Denver, and then we ended up moving back to Fort Collins. But there, that was some loss with that, but then also, some new change. And then opened up doors for me with my work. And so there's good and bad that way. But um, I think it's good to acknowledge the loss, because then you're not just bearing it, because at some point you're gonna face it if you don't feel it.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Even good things like kids going away to college, a daughter getting married, things that are just life milestones that you celebrate. There's loss in those things. There's loss because life is never going to be the way it was
Mhm.
before they went to college or before they got married. You don't dwell on the loss, but I think, as you just said, it's important to think about what was lost in order to fully grab a hold of the gains and the blessings in this new season, to be able to close the old season and embrace the new, right?
Exactly. I think about, as the kids are growing up and moving on, each time it just seems like somebody would always say, well, you still have another one at home, or you still have another one. But each child has a role in the family. And when they're, when they move out of that, everybody feels it. So it's not like, then you just kind of have to grieve it a little bit.
Yeah. After I was a financial consultant for 20 years, the Lord moved me into being a pastor of a church, Windsor Community Church, for 18 years.
Mhm.
And you were very much a part. I mean, obviously, like we're together in all of that, but we were more together in me being a pastor of a church than we were when I was a financial consultant, because I've got relationships with clients. I go to the office every day. When we made the decision to for me to step down as pastor 2 years before I actually did, how was that process for you in me stepping down, and then all that has transpired since then?
I think that along the way, it made sense to me, and I feel like um, but definitely it was sweet. We did everything together in ministry. I feel like there was just, and we talked about everything. It was just our life. So I felt like, even though I never wanted to say that I had any identity as being a pastor's wife, um, once it ended, I realized I really did. And so that was hard. I think maybe even when I might even say harder than it was for you, because you were like very, planning, and I've never been a goal setter, or you know, I'm kind of just go with the flow. So here I'm going with the flow, and then all of a sudden, it's dammed up, so to speak. It's just like everything stopped. And um, so I'd say I've had a, bit of a identity crisis, is trying to figure out, my place. And
It's been a year and a half since I stepped down.
mhm.
And to be, frank, it's been, we've been inconsistent on being a part of the Sunday gathering. We've been very consistent with our community group, which has really been a lifeline for us in many ways as far as Christian community goes. And then we've just recently made a decision to explore other churches, and which, if you think about it, we've been with the same church network since 1993. 03, 13, 23, 32 years. It's God's used us to help build that network of churches, to strengthen the church. And if the Lord leads us away from Windsor Community Church in this search, there's definitely going to be a sense of loss.
Yeah.
Does it feel that way to you?
Oh, it does. Yeah. Yeah. It's just it. The only thing that feels good about it is to make a decision on what we're going to do, because it's felt a little bit up in the air. And it's funny, you now with grown children, your children ask you questions about your life. Like Natalie, I remember this was probably 6 months in. She said, "Mom, it seems like you guys are watching church online more than you're going." And she said, "You didn't raise us that way." And I was like, "You're right. Thanks
Hmm.
for saying something." But so I love how your
Yeah.
kids will, you know, bring
Hmm.
bring conviction along the way.
I do want to say this. I mean, you and I've talked about this, and this podcast it's a public podcast, but I'm both very thankful and proud for the way that we left, and stayed around. And I'm also not sure I would prescribe that for somebody else because it has been, as you know, torture for me every time I show up there. And nobody's necessarily making me feel that way, but I felt that way. And we made a decision to stay at the church because we really wanted to support the elders and let the body know that this is a church that we can stay at, and not in a fake kind of way, but in a real supportive kind of way. But I'm thankful for that. How has that been for you to observe me? Has it been confusing for you? Has it been hard for you?
I can understand it in some ways just because your role just totally, like you don't have a role. Like it was totally
Hmm.
taken away from you. I still worked in children's for a while and it's different. And from that sense, it was different. So I could, um, but I've also been like, when you said last weekend that, what do you think if we just start making a decision and just that we're going to, give some other churches a chance? And I'm like, great. I just, I just want to belong. And probably one of the big things too has been our people in our small group have been so dear. They've been really been our anchor along the way that have supported us and just we had a very small group. It's grown to be bigger, but they really shepherded us through this time, and um, just thankful for those couples.
Totally. Well, it felt good to me to talk to you about it, and then talk to our community group about it, and talk to the elders at WCC, just so we can pursue what the Lord has. And we may end up staying at this church. We're open to that, but we really want to explore. Honey, there's a couple more things in our remaining time that I'd like to hit on if possible. One is our working out together. We, all three kids mentioned that exercise, fitness, health has been a big part of their upbringing, and they acknowledged that it was a family thing, but it was oftentimes me doing it with them. And I discovered CrossFit like 14 years ago ish, and invited you to like check it out with me. And to my like pleasant surprise, you wanted to join. Would you just explain in your own words the significance of that journey together has been in our life, in our ministry, our health, all of that?
I think, well, I didn't, my family growing up, there was never, nobody exercised. That was not, my little sister danced, and my sister Lori that passed away, she just was kind of a tomboy and just loved playing everything. But, never, we weren't, like, I wasn't athletic and wasn't encouraged in that way. And so I never was really consistent with exercise. I'd run here, and running was probably my favorite, but just did things here and there, nothing that I just stayed with for the long haul. And then when you asked me if I wanted to try this thing with you, then I was like, oh, he thinks I could do this. And then I
Hmm.
said, well, if anybody yells at me, I'm quitting. And I don't know why I
Because that's
thought
what
that.
people do at gyms.
Well, that was just the view of what I had at CrossFit, that it was just going to be like this hardcore, like people. Instead, it was a community of, like, one of the um, coaches early on said, "You haven't quit, you're still here." And so I still tell myself that, "Good job, Nancy, you haven't quit, you're still here." So it's the only, consistent thing. But to be able to do it together has been really fun. We do the same thing but different, but we know the same people, we're in the same community there, and so that's just been a lot of fun. And we can complain about our aches and pains because we get it,
Yes.
because we did the
Yeah.
same workout.
Many dear friends have come from that experience together.
Oh yeah.
It's one of the few places other than church where we can know the same people.
Mm-hmm.
We've baptized people. that we've met in the gym. We've done premarital counseling with people we've met in the gym. We've married people that we've met in the gym. You've cried with people. You've prayed with people. We laugh with people. I had to ask many times forgiveness of people for doing stupid things like throwing a jump rope. But it has been such a big part of our life. And just, I'm very proud of you. I tell you that all the time. I am your biggest fan. And you do more than show up. You show up and you put in the hard work. And 1 year 1 year past knee replacement surgery, and you're squatting, you're lunging, you're riding bikes. I mean, like, what in the world? You're like an alien.
Thank you. It's I always say I'm afraid to stop because I wouldn't know what to do, and every day I'd be like, well, I wouldn't have done that at home. So I'm glad I came because there's for sure it's been a good a good fit for us, and I think that yeah, the coaching has been great too. They don't expect the same thing from me that they expect from you. So
Yeah, well, they know that I'm missing a few brain cells and not the smartest guy in the world. I'm going to close with this question. There is a stereotypic relationship between a mother-in-law and her daughter-in-laws. And it's stereotypic because a lot of times it's true where there's not a great relationship between the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-laws. You have two daughter-in-laws. We have one son-in-law. We're not going to talk about our son-in-law because we'll just say this, that we love him so much. Such a good man. But talk to us a little bit about your relationship with your daughter-in-laws, because I know that there's going to be people listening that are in your place and they don't have a great relationship with their daughter-in-laws. So just talk about that relationship and how you've cultivated it and what that looks like today.
I think I had a bit of well, I definitely had a benefit having Krista live so close. We did a Bible study together, just a little simple study early on that talked about mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws, and just really just said, you know, I'm going to mess up and I'm going to say something that's going to hurt you. And so just kind of promise to give each other grace with that. And so I feel like it's developed over time. And and then with Brittany, it was a little bit trickier just having her live away. And so then it would be going out there, but trying to have time with her, but also just telling her that I know I'm going to say something that's going to hurt you. And she's super grace filled. And so she's never, there was one time that I said something it was early on, and Joey said something to me. And so then I was able to ask Brittany for forgiveness, and she just said, oh, of course. And, I just am so fortunate with these girls. But I think that one thing that I think intentionally I've tried to do, and it also makes sense because I can call the girls or I can text them and I'm going to get an answer from them before I'm going to get it from the boys, just because
Hmm.
probably because they're working. And although if I call Mitch, he'll call me back right away because he wants to make sure I'm okay, I think. Uh,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
I feel like our sons, one thing when they were younger and they were going to college and they were starting to date and stuff, and I told them, I said, you know what, you could there's so many great girls in Colorado, you can just find a girl here. And then I really felt like that was manipulative and went to them and I'm like, you know what, I want what God wants. And then they ended up marrying
Hmm.
girls from Colorado, which was pretty amazing. But
It's pretty amazing.
it is pretty amazing.
Met her in Arizona.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then met
That's-
Krista in the Czech Republic. But they the girls they picked were so perfectly suited for them. And actually, they're probably kind of interestingly enough, both girls I feel like I can relate to them because there's some similarity in some things that the way they parent and the way they think. They both are way more gifted in a lot of ways than I am, but I feel like I can relate to their personalities as well. And then Jared,
Hmm.
practically perfect in every way.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So,
Well, our life is rich, isn't it?
yes.
Thank you publicly for being my perfect helper, being the one that I need the most after Jesus. Thanks for being such a great mom-in-law, great Grammy to our 10 grandkids, working out with me at CrossFit, being a reconciler that seeks forgiveness when needed and always is willing to forgive me. Thank you for the hard work that you put into our kids and the example of Jesus that you are to them and to me. I love life with you. Every I do. I love life with you. I don't always act like I love life with you, but I love life with you. I wouldn't choose it any other way. So thank you for doing what you love most, and that's being on a camera and a
Yeah,
microphone.
right. Well, Mr. Hardy, thank you. And you are you bring the spice to our relationship. I bring the steady and you bring the spice. Grateful for
It's
that.
true. Steady and spice. I like it. I like it. Well, we're going to sign off. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Delay the Decay, and especially in this mini-series called Generational Health, the chain reaction, how one generation impacts the rest. And we've got 2 more episodes on the generational health. One is going to be my 90-year-old parents. I'm going to interview them. And then the other is a gentleman by the name of Chris Bruno, who is the founder of Restoration Project and Restory, who is an expert on generational health. So until next time, remember it's about direction, not perfection. If today's conversation on generational health sparks something in you, follow, subscribe, and share it with someone else who's shaping the next generation. Until next time, keep prioritizing what matters most. And remember, it's about direction, not perfection.